Over the weekend, on Saturday, we were out and about and noticed that the Goodwill in town was open. Most of them have been closed, and it seems like every time I go around to thrift stores, they're closed, but it was open. So I'm like, we had some time to kill because we had to wait for some friends. Let's go for the first time. Let's go to a Goodwill the first time in months. And it's one that we don't go to that often. It's way on the other side of town. We had to go over there, pick up something, and so and they had a ton of records. I mean, like 5 or 6 shelves full of them. I thought, oh boy, this is going to be great. This is going to be fun. As usual, it's the stuff that you find in thrift stores. It's the operas and the classicals and the show tunes and the stuff from the 50s and all of that. The stuff that tends to be beat up, the Percy Faith, the Al Hurt, all of that kind of stuff, which has its place, but obviously it's not necessarily the kind of stuff that I'm always looking for. And then every once in a while you're flipping through, and you get to the point where you can almost tell from the way the covers look. You just glance at the covers; they have that look or that feel. But occasionally you run across one that's like it stands out. It's different. There's something about this. It's fairly new. It's got to be somewhere in the past 40 years because it's so different. And so I did find a couple. Nothing, this is the jazz side of Jeff. I do like contemporary jazz. I watch the stuff that Lady Guru's doing with the match game, and she always tends to ask the people what genre of music do you have least knowledge of. I would not say jazz, but I would almost kind of say jazz because I like contemporary jazz. So in the 80s, 85-ish, I met some friends when I was in the military, and they were big into contemporary jazz. First band they turned me on to was Spyro Gyra, the Breakout album, and that still is probably my favorite Spyro Gyra album. But I have everything by Spyro Gyra. I've seen them in concert, least that I can recall 3 or 4 times, because we lived on Long Island for 4 years, and they're from New York, and so they played all the time. I've seen them in the city, I've seen them on this island, I've seen them at Westbury Fair, music festival, music place. Just one of my favorite bands, and so that's the contemporary jazz. And then big band jazz, I know a little about, but I don't have a whole lot. But that is some of the stuff I bought. The Benny Goodmans, I have CDs, with some of the guys, Al Roach and Buddy Rich and all that stuff. But still, there's that whole section I only know a little about. I love a lot of the music, the Glenn Miller stuff, and you get familiar with that. But when it comes to some of that style, the older style of jazz, or the vocal jazz stuff that you have with the singers back in the day, I don't know a whole lot about that. I don't know a whole lot about. I guess I'm just more contemporary jazz, but even then, there's a lot I don't know about that. I mean, I have Kenny G. I admit it. I have the Kenny G stuff because it's all contemporary, and the Richard Elliott, and the Dave Weckels, and I don't know. I got a lot of stuff. So when I saw some that are on the record label that I know is a record label that I have a lot of jazz stuff on, and I know that they were in good shape, I grabbed them. So Jean-Luc Ponty, I have some of his CDs, so I was already familiar with him, and I grabbed this. So I recognized that name, and and then I looked at it, and it's in really good condition. So I thought, for the price, I would grab it. I did notice when I got it home that it's a little warped. I noticed when I picked it up, it's got a little bend to it. But I have a clamp, so at least on the one side I'm able to clamp that down straight, and it plays fine. So yeah, he's a violinist. I would say, I don't have anything by him on vinyl, but one of my favorites, aside from Spyro Gyra, which I don't have on vinyl either. I see Spyro Gyra on vinyl often, but it's usually more than I want to spend on a jazz record. And so if I found them in a thrift store, I'd grab them up in a heartbeat. But they always tend to be in the $10 range, and I'm like, I have all the CDs. Do I really want to spend that much for that album? But I would love their stuff. Billy Cobham, drummer, is another one that I was greatly turned on to back in the day. really his 80s stuff more than his 70s stuff. His 70s stuff is almost like fusiony and very experimental. I mean, I like some of that stuff, the Spectrum years, and I have a lot of that on CD. But when it comes to like Power Play and some of those albums in the 80s, that was the stuff that I really cut my teeth on with him, and stuff since then. But I haven't found any of him in the thrift stores either. David Sanborn. Now, I picked up one of his at a different Goodwill a while back, and he's a saxophone jazz player, which is the key type of style that you see. The Dave Causes, the Kenny G's, the Richard Elliott's, everybody's saxophone player. And again, it was in good condition. Turns out, I guess this is more of a live album. So now I have 2 albums by him. And so, yeah, I went ahead and grabbed that. This, I'd heard the name, never heard anything by him, but again, it was on the GRP label. Dave Grusin. Now, I also, when I flipped over this just to look at it, I noticed it has, if you can see that, it has Steve Gadd on drums. I'm familiar with Steve Gadd and his work. So I thought, yeah, this is definitely worth having. And again, it was in great condition for a thrift store find. Cover and vinyl, great condition. And then I kept flipping and found another one. What was this one? This is Steve. Okay, that's just him, yeah. Yeah, okay. So, and again, a second one by him. And I think these were like late 70s, no, 84. So this is right in that era. And I throw them on and listen to them, and it's the kind of stuff I like. So this is the more modern contemporary jazz, the smooth jazz. I will say that I'm not as much into the improv jazz. So, for instance, I love Chick Corea's Electric Band. I do have some Chick Corea himself's, stuff from the 70s with Stanley Clarke and all those guys on there. But his Electric Band has Dave Weckl on drums. I love Dave Weckl. I love his stuff. I love his solo stuff. I love the stuff he's done. I've seen him in concert playing with the Buddy Rich Tribute Band. He's one of my favorite jazz drummers. But when you've got the Chick Corea Electric Band, which is killer, then you've got the Chick Corea Acoustic Band, which is Dave Weckl on drums and Chick Corea and what's his face, Petrucci on bass. But he's on a stand-up acoustic bass, and everything. So, and it's improv. It's just everybody doing their craziness. I don't get into that as much. I find it crazy after a while. Again, I like smooth jazz and the contemporary style, but when it comes to some of that improv stuff, not so much. All right, so that was all I found. I thought that was cool. These are some good finds. This is just some modern contemporary jazz, and I've listened to them all, and they're really good. So, and even though some of them are the names I'm not familiar with, this album, I don't know what caught my eye, because it's got your typical cover that you would see in a thrift store that you just is not what I'm stopping for, because it's not the kind of stuff I'm looking for. But as I flip by, I noticed, wow, this cover's got tape on it, and somebody has made a homemade cover out of this. And then I saw the date on it, and then I thought, I just stopped and took a look. So here it is. It used to be the Browns with Jim Edward Brown. So the Browns. This is the kind of stuff you see when you flip through, the white backgrounds with the picture. So you're flipping through, even if they're backwards, you see this and you're like, yeah, it's not the stuff I'm stopping for. Same with the cover. It's got the old-timey look. But you see this. And so it says, Never No Mo Blues. And then it says 52, which I still haven't 100% determined what that is. And then in lighter right, it says Jimmy Rogers. You can't really see the tape. It's hard to see. You can see it if you're here with me. So come on over and I'll show you. It says Jimmy Rogers. And then he scratched off this at the top and he wrote September 7, 1928. I'm like, huh. And he's got the same stuff written on the back. So I'm like, huh, a blues album, 1928. Intriguing. So I stopped and I pulled it out. Got the nice faded old sleeve. And Victor Recording, RCA, and the album, look at it. I didn't clean it. This is how it looked. It was pristinely shiny. Barely a scuff mark on there, if you can see that right there near the inner circle there. Other than that, I'm like, oh my gosh. It is like new. So then I looked at it, and it doesn't have a year on it. I assume the 52 in a Circle might be the year it was released, but when I look it up on Discogs with this catalog number, it actually came out in 56. So what I'm holding here is a 1956 album. And then I look at all the tracks, and they're all recorded between 1928 and 1933, I think I saw. So I see a cover that looks homemade. It's got blues on it, and that's not that would be one I don't know a lot about. I see a lot of people on here that love the blues. I don't know a lot about the blues. And so I bought this as my first blues album. Now, of course, I know Southern Rocky blues type stuff, but not real blues. This is Jimmie Rodgers. I guess this is real blues from the 20s. So I had to buy it, and I grabbed it. And it's just neat to have, in my opinion, it's neat to have an album that was recorded, songs that were recorded in the 20s. And the homemade cover, I thought it was kind of a nifty thing. It is interesting that this is an RCA Victor. Even this cover comes from that, so they put it in the right type of cover. So it was an interesting thing, and the fact that it was in great condition, to me, it's just like if you've got an album that is that old, that is in that good a condition, that deserves to be rescued and played. Even some of the stuff that's in rougher condition deserves it, but you're like, I don't want to damage my needle and blah blah blah. But when I find an album that old, that's that clean, somebody took care of it, or they never listened to it, and I just think it deserves to be listened to. I brought it home and listened to it. Now, again, not familiar with the blues. I've heard some of the old stuff, the old recordings that sound really ancient, and this kind of has that feel, but it sounds pretty good. This guy's kind of a yodeling blues, so he's always like doing the yodels, and it's over and over, it seems like, in every song. Apparently that was a style back then. I looked him up on Discogs, and he has no albums prior to the 50s, because all of the albums that they released in the 20s and 30s were 78s, 10-inch 78s, and they were singles. Almost everything I saw in there were singles, 2 songs. And so it didn't look like he really had any albums. It was hit just singles after singles after singles. And I could look deeper. Maybe there was multiple EPs or something, but singles after singles after singles, 20s through the 30s. And then all of a sudden in the 50s, I guess somebody compiled them, and from the 50s on, you've got all kinds of collections of Jimmie Rodgers. And so what I've got here is probably one of the early collections, one of the early releases of his music that was recorded in the 20s. So I thought it was really neat. I listened to it. It was like a time capsule to me. It just felt neat. I'm listening to a guy long since gone. I'm listening to a guy who existed before my dad wasn't even born when these songs were recorded. He was born near the end of when they were recorded. Just when you start thinking about this stuff and thinking about the age, I don't know, to me, it's interesting. So now, this won't mean anything to anybody except people who know what I'm talking about. And I'm going to put this up here and see if anybody knows what I'm talking about. Only an elite group of people are going to know what this means. I took a picture of this and I sent it to the guy on Facebook that would know what this meant. And I said, look what I found. But second song on this album, let me get my finger out of the way. The Great Speckled Bird. That song was recorded by somebody in more modern times. And if you know who it is, comment below what I'm talking about. I will say that it is something that was recently reissued on vinyl. It's a quirky song, and somebody totally off the wall, you would never think would record that, has recorded it. Now don't go to Discogs and start searching for the song and see who I'm talking about. Does anybody out there, I'm sure there are at least 2 people, at least 2 to 3 people that watch me regularly that probably know what I'm talking about, but maybe you don't. Check it out, see what you think, comment below, like, subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later. Rock on.